Hello, good evening. I started dancing because, that's just what we do. We dance. Before we know about art, we're dancing. Before we know about rhythm and meter, we're dancing. Before we know about method and technique, we're dancing. Before we know about career aspirations, we're dancing. We dance. This is what we do. We're creatures who dance, I believe. And I think that when we're watched, I think that when we perform for others, our dancing becomes electric and vivified, and we become powerful beyond measure and valuable. In a world of meaning, the images that we give to the public, I think they're an unquestionable good that not only enrich the human experience, I think it explains it. Now, some of my earliest memories are of performing for audiences, great audiences, in my living room, in my imagination, and to the music of Scott Joplin or Kurt Weill, Bernstein. My dance at that age was mostly about throwing myself into the couch again and again, and ecstasy. And then later it was the Bee Gees and the Beatles, and then later Laurie Anderson and Grandmaster Flash. These became my teachers. But it was actually Baryshnikov. That was the catalyst for me. At age 10, the great dancer of our time, Mikhail Baryshnikov, I saw him performing in a movie called The Turning Point. And I remember at age 10 looking at him and thinking, oh yeah, that's me. I mean, I didn't know anything about ballet, but I recognized something in him was in me too. And so, growing up in a small town in America, I mean, literally Grover's Corners, New England, I convinced my mother to bring me to the only ballet school in town, Miss Lin's School of Russian Ballet, and thus began my education, not only in formal dance, but in the position of ballet in our society and the rules of gendered behavior that I was transgressing. And twice a week, I'd get off the yellow school bus 2 stops too early, and I would walk in the opposite direction of Miss Lin's school to avoid the gaze of my schoolmates. And then I'd double back around, and I'd wait at the bottom of the steps, and then bolt up into the studio so that nobody would see me. And needless to say, I was the only boy in a room full of pink-tided girls, sworn to secrecy, because there were serious consequences to my secret becoming divulged. I mean, I wasn't gay, but dancing for boys was queer. Isn't that a great word? Queer. I mean, it just means different, right? It means strange. And it used to mean worthless, but it doesn't anymore. And when I was a kid, queer and gay, these were synonymous, and they were fighting words. But hey, not anymore. And this is good. This is progress for... Anyway, my little Billy Elliot story is actually quite laughable because, compared to the outrageous adversity that some of my colleagues, boys and girls, encountered when they found their salvation in ballet. Adversity heaped upon them by friends and family, religious communities, teachers, because not only did they love ballet, but they were different in ways which were even more uncomfortable for the society. I mean, these were children who actually were gay or economically underprivileged, or androgynous, or the wrong shade of skin. They were queer, like me, but more so. So, imagine my surprise when, years later, I did enter into a professional career to discover that ballet with a capital B, could be even more intolerant and was unrepresentative of many of the people that loved it to the exclusion of all other passions, all other potentials. And by this time, I'd been dancing for 25 years, and I'd lived in New York and in Frankfurt and in Paris and Madrid, and I had the great honor of dancing on some of the world's most historic stages. But where were the black people? Where were the brown people? Where were the people with the wrong body types? For many of them, there was no place. Some passed and became the lone, dark-skinned white swan, or spent their entire careers dancing heteronormative roles when off stage. These were women who loved women and men who loved men, as if our dancing natures could only be expressed in outmoded 19th century norms of behavior and had no legitimacy in today's society. The sometimes obnoxious, but always evolving, beautiful now in which we live, in which we actually live. Dance break. Certainly the world has changed since classical ballet came of age in ways much more numerous than I could even list here. How we work and how we play and the art we make and who we make the art with, how we make the art, what we're making art about. What about ballet? What about ballet? I know it sounds like I'm trying to dismantle ballet here, but that's far from the case. That's not it. To be clear, I say it is an unalienable right of this and every future generation to experience the artworks consecrated by our forefathers, even when these artworks often drag into our present objectionable mores and prejudices that we're trying hard to divest ourselves in as a society and leave in the past as relics. Ballet, as we have received it, it will continue. It should continue forward. Although it encodes many hurtfully specious fantasies, ballet in the abstract. That's amazing. It's amazing. It's essentially good. How can it be both hurtful and essentially good? Because the problem, I think, is the word, ballet. Ballet, the word, is the problem. It needs disambiguation, like the word queer. We have to make a distinction between ballet, the movement system, which, as far as I can tell, is unimpeachable, and ballet, the collection of artworks that have been made by that movement system, not the same thing. And ballet, the movement system, is unambiguous. We can treasure the refinement of the bodies and the gesture, the technicity, the mesmerizing rationality of the art form. It's like a grammar that can be combined and recombined infinitely or broken to fit the aesthetic tendencies of the day, or expand, contract, to tell stories about the past, our present, I suspect the future, stories for which there's no narrative, there are no words perhaps, but must be said by dancing. And so, ladies and gentlemen, 4 years ago, in a cafe, actually, not far from here, I came to the conclusion that the best thing I could do for the art form that I loved was to add my voice to those who have tried to productively disrupt it. I started a new company, and I called it Ballet of Difference. Why Ballet of Difference? Because I was smitten by a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, conservatism and innovation are very old and have disputed the possession of the world ever since it was made. Yes, that's right. And the name Ballet of Difference, it neatly contains this dispute. Let's play a game. Okay, I'm going to say a word, and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Ready? 1, 2, 3, ballet. Don't all speak at once. I'll try to represent. Hierarchy, uniformity, a symmetrical visualization of time and space and gesture. It's conservative by nature. It's about conservation, and that's good. This is a very good thing. Culture needs that. But what culture also needs is innovation. It needs difference. And when we talk about difference, we're talking about now. We're talking about fluid identities and an overwhelming influence of foreign culture. When we talk about difference, we're talking about the other. It's queer, it's here, whether we like it or not. And when we put ballet and difference together, conjoin that with the word of, ballet of difference, boom. Well, those two seemingly contradictory notions of conservation, innovation, come into intimate contact, and that heat, that friction is at the heart of our work as a ballet company whose mission it is to express the contemporary condition. We are swirling together the past with the present to invoke the future, a better future, a more complex future, but an inclusive future. Now, occasionally I have met beautiful dancers who stunningly represent this synergy as unicorns. As unicorns, they emerge from the cracks of our institutions. Singularities, and 4 of them are with us today. 4 of them are with us today. Shortly, they will be performing for you a little sneak preview of our next premiere. Ladies and gentlemen, for your consideration, Margarita Netto and Jemima Rose Dean, both deeply steeped in classical ballet and club culture, and for whom the classical ballet repertoire no longer holds any interest. They will be joined on stage by Mason Manning and Long Zhu, for whom classical ballet holds no quarter. Mason Manning, whose explosive physicality is at once in equal measure masculine and feminine. Long Zhu, who absolutely epitomizes the synthesis between the historical and the contemporary as a Chinese man born and bred and trained in China who owns this art form. He owns ballet. Moreover, he's a man who dances in point shoes. Point shoes, ladies and gentlemen. Point shoes, a fashion technology which neatly divide the genders. It polarizes the sexes in a way like no other article of clothing that I can think of other than a brassiere, quite frankly. And there's no biological reason for it. It's purely conventional. And he dances in them like terpsichore in sneakers. These 4 dancers, they don't fit the image of classical ballet. And so ballet must adapt to fit the image of them. This is what we do. This is why I do what I do. And without any further ado, I give you Ballet of Difference.